Welcome back to another episode of She's Aligned. Today we're going to be talking about spirituality. Also, happy solar eclipse.
It won't be the solar eclipse by the time you guys watch this, or will it?
No.
It will not. But happy solar eclipse. I'm excited because we're going to talk about our journeys with spirituality, the inner work with spirituality, the outer work. There's so many different levels that we want to jump into. So, yeah, where do we want to start?
Why don't we start with kind of defining what spirituality is? I think people have different ideas of what spirituality can be, but I think there's a base point and there's different practices within spirituality. So should we start there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have an answer? I mean, I have like a very simple answer to that question.
Okay.
So I think for me, spirituality is your connection to self and your connection to source. Like if I had to just summarize it, I think that's what it is. And, you know, we live in a world where it's become so commercialized, you know, and people have taken spirituality in so many different directions and have given it so many different definitions. But I think if you really boil it down, it's just your connection to self and your connection to source. That's how I see it.
I agree. Spirituality is very much a practice of self and being in tune with yourself and being aware of our subconscious mind, and also being aware that we're our own creators of our own reality and universe. It has nothing to do with your external world, but has everything to do with yourself internally. And that is why we call it an awakening, because we awaken to ourselves and to the reality of the universe and the energies and the vibration. And it's really just an inner journey work. Without the inner work, you have no spiritual practice.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it starts always with the inner work. And I think that a lot of people try to be spiritual externally without focusing on the internal, you know. And I think the reality is, like, you can buy all the crystals and all the oils and all the incense and all the sage, but if you're not actually doing that inner work, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Whenever you're doing spirit work, rituals, any sort of healing, there has to be intention behind it. You can't just think you can walk around with a crystal and be healed, or manifest something with a crystal. There needs to always be an intention behind it, and the inner work that you're doing behind the scenes to manifest whatever you're looking to manifest. But definitely, a lot of people think that you can just buy crystals, you can just buy like tarot cards, or you can just buy sage, or you can just, like Natalia said, just buy oils and, oh my God, I'm spiritual. Or you'll see angel numbers everywhere and you're like, oh my God, I must be spiritually awakening. But all of that means nothing without no intention and no journey of the self behind the scenes, behind the closed doors. It's very much a self journey, and what you do behind closed doors, that matters the most.
Yep, I totally agree. So we want to share what some of that has looked like for us, like that inner work, because I think the most powerful thing we can share about inner work is kind of what that has looked like for us and how we've, you know, played that out in our lives. Because everyone's story is different, everyone's journey is different. And I do feel like those tools, right, whether it's like tarot or astrology or anything like that, I think they're like a good thing to start with that like pulls you in, you know, because I think what happens is we get curious about astrology or tarot or anything like that, and it's a good tool to bring you in. But at the end of the day, it's like you don't want to put your faith in the tarot cards or in the, you know, it's like you want to learn to put your faith in yourself and then use that as, I almost see it as like confirmation, or I think it's just really confirmation of what's already inside of you.
Yeah, personally, I believe if you place all of your trust externally, it then turns into like religion, right?
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, with religion, all of your faith and your trust is based on an external being and not within. So if you're on a spiritual journey and you place all of your trust and emphasis on cards or whatever tool you're using, you're then not in tune with yourself and listening to yourself. So then it starts to be less spiritual and more religious, in my personal opinion. But when we go back to the basis of spirituality, it's all about self and the self-awareness and the inner work. So always be mindful of whatever practice you get into, that you're always going back to yourself and always going back to your inner work and the messages that you're receiving internally, because that's what's most important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what I like about inner work is it's really the behind the scenes, and I feel like that's the layer we're going to peel back today. Is like it's the behind the scenes of the work that's needed in order to really manifest and create the life you desire. And I think that there is such a like misconception where if people don't like what they're seeing externally, they try to fix it externally without realizing that if you want things to shift, you have to go inward and you have to go inside and fix what's happening there in order to create the outer reality that you desire. And it's so easy, I think, for example, to look at us and be like, oh, look, they have their podcast and their business and they're spiritual and they're this and that. But none of this happens or would be here if we hadn't done the inner work and if we weren't actively doing that inner work. And I think that's what I want you guys to see today, is that we're doing this inner work behind the scenes that we can share with you guys today in order to create these lives that we have. We don't just wake up and like show up here and we're just, ready to go. It's like it requires so much on the inside to be able to show up in this way.
So what stood out to me is a couple of episodes back, my boyfriend asked me, he said, how do you guys know all of this stuff? And I looked at him and I said, because we're constantly doing the inner work. We're constantly learning whatever is in our ears and whatever we're watching. We always make sure that it elevates us and that we're always learning and growing. We don't just know this because we know this. Yeah. We know this because we've done the work. We study it. We watch it. We listen to it. So as Natalia said, it all goes back to the inner work and how much inner healing and inner knowing you want to bring into your life and to learn. And it's not an easy path. It's really difficult. Going through an awakening it shatters your whole world, but in the best way possible. It's definitely a tower moment, and you're like, oh my God, like I can't believe that I've been living my life this specific way, and it doesn't have to be that serious. And I do want to ask you, what are some takeaways now that you're on a spiritual journey? What are some things that have stood out to you that you've learned being on a spiritual path?
I mean, number one, that like inner work is what shifts everything. And that's the hard work, because for me that looked like going to therapy and dealing with all my shit and years and years of therapy, and I'm still at a point now where I feel like therapy is probably a lifelong thing. I'm not currently in therapy, but I'm like, I'll go back if and when it's needed, that working with energy healers. But even though I was, working with these people, they were tools and space holders for me to, to mirror back to me the work that I needed to do. Because I think that before you do the inner work, you haven't done it, or you haven't fully like embraced it when you continue to make yourself the victim and you blame everything and everybody else, right? It's everybody else's fault. It's everyone else's fault. It's the situation. It's this and that. So if you're like continually victimizing yourself, which I definitely did, I felt like I was the victim of my circumstances. And because of that, I was not positioning myself to grow. And once I started to do that inner work and be supported through it and cry through it and feel all the feelings that I'd been suppressing and, really look at myself and how I was creating my reality, then I was able to begin to shift things. So I think that knowing, and now I know if something is off, I need to go back inward. I need to look at myself and say, okay, what's going on here that's creating this? Because every person that walks into our life, every situation we find ourselves in, we have somehow created. And it is so hard to acknowledge that, and it is so hard to see that and to accept it. But if you're someone who's like, no, I'm just a victim. Like, you cannot change your reality when you're the victim of it. But when you choose to take ownership of your reality, then you can begin to change things. Then you can begin to create a different reality for yourself. So even with my business, I feel like my business, I struggled until I did the inner work. Like, it wasn't that I needed another business strategy. It was that I needed to look at the shit that was like holding me back, you know? So I feel like the biggest thing for me is like, go in. Always go in and see what's going on there, because that is going to tell you everything. The answers you're looking for are inside of you, you know? So that's how I see it. And what really has helped me.
Yeah, definitely do think that inner work is the number one for sure. I think for me, it's been realizing that everything means nothing, and nothing means everything. And in the grand scheme of things and how large the universe is, I realized that what I've been through and what I have, it all means nothing at the end of the day. And to me, that was so freeing, because I realized that nothing that I have and nothing that I've been through defines who I am. And who I am is what is truly in my heart and my intentions that I have for others and for my life, for myself, for the universe. But for me, it's definitely been that mindset shift of knowing that everything means nothing and nothing means everything.
Yeah.
And whenever I'm going through anything horrible, like if I'm going through a shitty day, I never allow myself to marinate in those emotions. I always tell myself, like, you can sit here and have a shit day for the rest of the day and be upset, or you can shift that reality right now and make the day better. And then realizing that that little inconvenience means nothing. And it for me, it's just realizing that nothing means anything at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just so powerful to me, because I know that I'm not limited and I'm not defined by what has happened to me and the things that I have and the things that I've accomplished.
Yep. And I think it's really understanding that there's always multiple truths going on. And you get to choose which truth you want to highlight, you know, because, for example, like if I look at you, you could easily be like, oh, I'm the victim of multiple toxic relationships. You could also say, I am thriving in a really healthy relationship now. And both are true, but you can choose which one you want to spotlight. And you could still be spotlighting your past relationships and still be stuck there and still be like, that's my truth. Or you could do the inner work, which you did, and have a healthy relationship and not continue to repeat those patterns. And I think that's something that I try to remind myself all the time, is like, there are always multiple truths, there are always multiple narratives, and I get to choose which one is going to be my truth and which one is going to be my narrative that is ultimately going to become my reality. Because while I can't change the future, I can make choices in the present that will change. I can't change the past, but I can make choices in the present that will change my future.
1000%. You are the writer of your own story in your own book.
So for you, like, how, because I really like how you said, you know, we got to take ownership and realize, like, we write our story. So how do you view that with the idea of co-creating with the universe?
So what does co-creating with the universe mean to you?
So to me, it means that I'm not doing things alone.
Okay.
You know, it means that I have support, that, you know, for example, like if I think about your story with getting the studio, like it required you to put in your part, but also I believe the universe was like doing their part. You know what I mean?
Yes. Okay. I definitely do believe in co-creating with the universe, and I do think that there are multiple realities going on at once, and there's different versions of us in different dimensions. And I think this is where the law of attraction and mindset manifestation really plays into it, because aside of just being spiritual and aware, like self-aware enough, you also have to realize that you are you what has happened in your life is a reflection of what you have put out into the universe.
Mm-hmm.
So I do believe that different realities and multiple things that we are trying to manifest vibrate at specific frequencies and vibrations.
Mm-hmm.
And it is our duty when we are trying to manifest to be in that vibration and in that energy, so that then we're in tune with the universe and whatever it is that we're trying to manifest. Kind of like when you go into your car, there's specific radio frequencies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to listen to Kiss FM, you know that you have to change the frequency to 102.7, and then you're able to tune into that radio frequency. So I definitely do believe that there is co-creating with the universe, but I think for me it's being in tune and knowing with what you want and being able to manage your own vibration and energy to be in tune with the universe and co-create with the universe.
I like that.
Yeah.
And the reason I asked that question is because I feel like I tend to see people who are really like in one or the other, in the sense where it's like, oh, I'm just gonna let the universe do its thing and I'm just gonna like chill.
No, there's
or
no
on
way.
the other end, you know, where they don't even, they're not putting any trust in the universe and they're trying to like control everything.
Yeah, there's no way. And that's where a lot of people will block their manifestations, because a lot of people are like, oh, I just need to tell the universe, but they don't do the action, right? Or they're like, oh, but I want this, but they don't set the right intention. They don't give the right vibration or frequency, but they're constantly working at whatever they're trying to manifest, but with the wrong intention and wrong frequency. So it's like you have to have like this perfect recipe of managing your own vibration and frequency while doing the aligned action to get that manifestation to co-create with the universe.
I totally agree. And when you were talking, like this example came to me of, you know, it's like when we walk into a restaurant and we place an order, we sit there and we wait for the order to come, and then the server can bring us the order. But the server can't bring us our order until we place our order, which means like we have to look at the menu, we have to look at our options, we have to decide what we want. And once we decide what we want, we place our order and sit there and trust, and then the universe like delivers it, you know? So like what I wrote down is that the universe can only serve you what you order. And so to me, that's like how you take ownership while also co-creating. Because if you were doing it yourself, then you would walk into the restaurant, sit down, order, go to the back, cook your meal, come back, serve it to yourself, sit down and eat it.
I love this.
Right? And a lot of people are doing that, and then they're like, I'm so tired. Of course you are. You know, like you're trying to do everything. But when you let the universe co-create with you, you can sit, place your order, choose what you want. And I think people get stuck there too, where they're like, I don't know what I want, I don't know what to choose. There's no right or wrong answer. Like just decide what flavor of life you want to live. Let the universe know, and then once you place the order, the universe can go make it and deliver it. But unless you order, the universe cannot serve you anything.
And just because you did order and you're like, oh, that's not what I wanted, it's not to say that you're going to be stuck with that. You can always give the order back and order something else. Don't think that just because you're like, oh my God, like I don't know what I want, so I'm not going to order. Sometimes you won't know until you get that, right? And then, but you can always shift that reality. You don't have to be stuck there and just be like, well, this is what I asked for, so I'm just going to shove it down my mouth and I'm going to deal with it. No, you're in charge of your own reality, and you're able to shift that reality at any time for yourself.
Yeah. And the reality too is you're going to get hungry again. So just eat it and like order again. You know what I mean? Like it's going to, there's always more. And I think that's actually something I've been thinking a lot about when it comes to like my spiritual journey. I feel like I'm really good at like manifesting, and I'll ask for things and then I'll get it. And then I'll be like, okay, I should be good. I should be good now. I should be content. But then I observe people around me who are basically like, they're manifesting what they want, but then they're asking for more, and I see how the universe continues to give them more. And I'm noticing I have this like limiting concept of like, once I ask for something and I get it, I should be satisfied and it should be enough. And then I'm watching other people that I look up to that are like asking for the thing, getting it, asking for more and getting it, asking for more and getting it, asking for more and getting it. And I'm just like, damn, I'm limiting myself by stopping. you know, because I'll like place my order, I'll get it, and I'm like, okay, I'm good. And I feel like the universe is like coming around, like, but do you want some dessert?
Mm-hmm.
But do you want some coffee with that? Do you want
A
a
martini? Would you like to
martini,
spice things
some
up? Do you want a
dessert wine? And I'm
martini?
like, no, I'm good. You know, like I should be happy with what I got. And I feel like the universe is really just like, hello, like I'm unlimited, you
Yes.
know? But I do think a lot of that comes from just like limiting beliefs, you know, maybe the
Mm-hmm.
way we're raised, like because our parents were raised a certain way. And so they're just like, be grateful for what you have, be happy with what you have. And so I feel like the universe is really challenging me to be like, get some dessert, you know, like order some coffee,
Like, it's
like go,
okay.
yes, like take it to another level, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because I think we can be content. And what I've learned is like content sometimes can be limiting in certain situations, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So I don't know why I went there, but it just came to my mind.
But I love that example that you just gave because I think so many people will be able to understand it because we all go to restaurants and we all place orders, you know.
Hmm. So I have a question. How did you know that you were spiritual? Like, were there any signs? Like, what did you see that led you to know that you were a spiritual being?
I had many signs growing up since I was a child. So many unexplained things that even to this day I'm like, that really did happen to me. And I've always thought about them. I've always thought about them. I never stopped thinking about them. Um, my earliest memory of like some little signs that I would get from the universe. It's so weird. I remember I was in my aunt's room and it was my birthday. And I looked up, this is going to sound so bizarre, but just hear me out. This is going to sound so bizarre. It was my birthday. I was little. I would say I was under 10 years old. I want to say I was about maybe like 6, 7. And I remember I looked out the window, and this was already after my grandma passed. I looked out the window, and in the clouds, I read Happy Birthday, Natalie.
What?
I know. Oh, I'm feeling weird right now. Um, I read Happy Birthday, Natalie in the sky,
Mm.
and I remember being so confused, like as a little girl, because I'm like, am I reading that right? Like, why does it say Happy Birthday, Natalie? You know, like
Hmm.
when you have like little planes that go into the air and they'll write like
Yeah.
stuff in the clouds.
Hmm.
That's basically what I read
Mm.
in the clouds. And another example, when my grandpa passed away, about like I don't know if it was like a month or two after he passed away, I was outside, and he passed away when I was 10. So I was outside playing in the front yard, and he was, I saw his van going from one block to the next, but through the alley because you can take a shortcut, and I
Hmm.
saw him driving in the van.
And he had already
He had already
passed.
passed.
Mm.
And I remember just thinking, I'm like, I just saw my grandpa. I just saw
Mm.
like, and it was just so bizarre to me because like I'm just confused and I don't know like what to make of it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then also as a teenager, I would take naps a lot in my room, and I was always woken up by a woman whispering my name in my ear.
Mm.
And also, now this is also coming to me. Um, I remember as a kid, a teenager specifically, I would get paralyzed in my bed,
Mm.
and there would be like a it wasn't like a black shadow figure, but it kind of looked like a rectangle, and it
Mm.
was like gray, but it was illuminated around, so it kind of looked like neonish,
Mm.
and it was in the corner of the room, and it would just like come towards me,
Mm.
and but like in like it, and it would glitch towards me, and I remember being so paralyzed on my bed just staring at it as it would get closer to me, and then it would just disappear.
Mm.
um my god, I'm just like, these are all like things that happened I've never said out loud, so I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I was
sound
gonna
so
ask, like, when
weird.
these things happened, did you tell anybody? Like, when even when you were little, you weren't like, "Oh, I just saw my grandpa," or things
I
like that.
don't think I did. I don't think I told anybody about my name in the. Actually, I think I told my mom about my name in the clouds. I didn't tell anyone about my grandpa. The gray shadow, I started talking about that once my awakening came about. But like to sit down and kind of like list the things that have happened to me growing up, like I don't think I've ever
Like shared
like
it.
shared anything. And then also I wrote down here the letter to God, because like looking back to me, I'm like, oh, that's like my little self being a witch already, like co-creating with the universe and manifesting, because I actually did do that. I ended up doing it with my mom outside, and which is funny because now my mom will do rituals outside with me when there's a full moon, which is hilarious.
I love that.
But I wrote what I wanted on a piece of paper. I folded it, I tied it to the balloon, and then I released it to God, quote unquote, which obviously is the universe. And it was just me releasing my intention and what I wanted already at such a young age. And then some little things like would really attract me to the spiritual realm. As I mentioned, even though I was Christian growing up, there were many moments that I would pass by spiritual stores, and I felt very, very like attracted to it. I felt very like I wanted to go in, like I wanted to ask questions, like, and I had no idea why I felt so drawn to the spiritual stuff, but now it all makes sense. I remember like when I would go to like LA or Hollywood, I would walk down like some streets and see like crystals and like psychic palm readings and astrology stuff and tarot cards, and I would just stand in front of the stores and just stare. And I just felt so drawn, and I couldn't explain why, but I just did. But those are like the little things that really stand out to me, and I always have like an inner knowing. As like a child growing up, I always felt very in tune, and it's so weird. I always felt very in tune with like the earth and the moon growing up. I was very like such like a nature person. When I was out in nature as a teenager, I would jump from rock to rock pretending I was like Pocahontas and going into like the river, and I just felt so called to earth. For some, I love earth, guys. Like I'm obsessed with the earth, and I love the moon, but earth to me for some reason is so beautiful, and I think it's so beautiful that it provides for us human beings so naturally in its purest form. But I'm just feeling a connection really to like the universe and the moon and earth. It's like this pure love that I have like internally. But those are like all the little signs that I had growing up that I just could never like pinpoint like why I felt this way, you know.
Do you feel like once you started your awakening and like getting into spirituality, you started to like see more signs, or do you think that those signs were just trying to like lead you into your spirituality?
I think all of the signs were leading me to spirituality, but I still experience some stuff in my spiritual journey. And funny enough, too, when I would go to like Christian churches, at times with my mom and my babysitter at the time, I remember seeing people sitting in the chairs being in such despair and so sad and just calling out for help. And to me, I never understood why like people were in such despair at church. And just to me, it just didn't sit right. And I remember just staring at people and being like, this doesn't seem right. This doesn't feel right. Because if this is true, why are you so sad?
Yeah.
Why are you so angry? Why do you feel like you don't have enough? But now being on a spiritual journey, there are still some signs. But the one that really stands out to me, I was outside watching a lunar eclipse because I've always been so fascinated with eclipses. And I was outside about, I think it was like 2 a.m. And I remember sitting on my lawn chair just waiting for the lunar eclipse, just so excited. And then finally it went into totality. And when it did, there was like this rush of energy. Like I can't even explain. I remember sitting down so like, I was so in awe of the universe because all of the clouds around, I remember looking up. It looked like the moon was sucking in the clouds. Like, I kid you not. I remember just staring and I'm like, I can't believe that I am witnessing this right now. And I know that I'm witnessing this because it's a confirmation from the universe that it's working with me and it's all expansive and there's just so much energy and so much magic in the universe. And I remember I wanted to cry. And as it was happening, I ran inside. I'm like, Mom, come outside, come see. And she saw. And she was like, wow, it looks like the moon is sucking in the clouds right now. Like,
So
they all just went like towards the moon, and it was so beautiful. And yeah, I've still had many signs, but those are like the like the few that really stand out to me.
I love that.
Yeah. What about you? I'm so excited to hear your signs because I know you've always been really spiritual growing up.
So I feel like it started small, where like I would read my astrology, like my horoscope, and I remember I wasn't allowed to. Like my mom was like, "No, you can't read them," but I would buy the magazines like just to read it.
The 17 magazine.
Oh yeah, because I'd be like, "What's my horoscope? What does it say about being an Aries?" And I always felt very attracted to that, so I remember I would like hide to read it. And I think a lot of it for me really started to expand more. I would say like within the church, and for me it was just things like connecting with Jesus and actually being able to feel him and hear him and talk to him, even in an environment where, even though that was encouraged, it wasn't normal. People weren't like, oh yeah, I talked to Jesus or I felt Jesus. And I do remember there was this one time specifically where I was laying in bed, and I don't remember if I was like praying or worshiping or something, but I felt like Jesus like literally came into the room. I think it was, and even like God, and it was such an overwhelming like presence, but it felt so good. Like I've never really been like high, but I remember feeling like I was just on this high, from just feeling this overwhelming like presence and love and peace. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like this is what God feels like, And so I think the experiences started there.
I do have a question.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Now looking back, when you connect that, do you still think it was Jesus? Do you think it was God? What do you think it was that you were feeling now that you're on a spiritual journey and you've left religion?
I think that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I wonder if it was specifically, I mean, I think it was God. Whether in that time I thought I saw it in the form of Jesus, or, I think that it was just God, like, showing his love to me, so or the universe. Yeah, I think it was just the universe, like, pouring its love on me, and I think now, like before I used to be triggered by the word God, like I didn't even want to use it or even talk about Jesus. And now I don't feel that way. I think now now I'm okay with it because I've done the healing work around it. And I don't know if I shared this in another podcast, but like now when I do healings and stuff, sometimes Jesus shows up. I've had John the Baptist show up to do healings, and I'm like, what are you doing here? So it's kind of funny to see it come back around.
Yeah.
But it's like I see other beings too. So
yeah, I think that ties into like when we peel back the curtain, it's all the same thing at the end of the day, and then there's different prophets that are ascended beings that came to heal and do work in humanity. So
yes,
because
it makes
sense.
It could be John the Baptist. I've also had goddesses show up that I don't even know who they are. Like they'll just tell me their name, and I'll do their work with them with the client, and then I'll look them up afterward, and they're part of, they're like a legit goddess, and I'll find all this information on them, and I'm like, I didn't even know who you were,
Yeah.
So to me, and I hold those things equal, where I'm like, it could be Jesus, it could be a goddess, it could be, someone's ancestor.
Yeah.
And I think the other way it played out for me in church that eventually, like, I think it evolved into what I do now, and even outside of the church, was that I remember, like, when I was a youth leader, when I worked like in the church, we would go to camps, and you go on these retreats, and the intention is to connect with God and like help teenagers connect with God. And I remember when there were people, when we were praying or worshiping, like I would feel called to go up to somebody and just start telling them all these, like giving them all these messages from God. And within the church context, it was like prophesying or whatever they called it.
Which is funny because like in spirituality or like, any other religion, God forbid, even in astrology, God forbid that you foretell anything.
Oh yeah, but I was foretelling.
Exactly.
It's
but like within the context of church, it's okay.
Yeah, because it's prophesying.
But God forbid, it's outside of the church.
I know.
All of a
wrong.
Sudden, it's like black magic, and you're a witch, and you're evil, and you're satanic.
But it's like, it's the same thing. I do it now still, So, and I remember like there was one specific situation where I did that, and I was just like prophesying, foretelling over this girl. And I remember when I got up, like all the leaders were just staring at me, like they thought it was so weird. So even within that context, I think I was even like embracing my spirituality in a way where it wasn't even like accepted fully because it wasn't normal, but it's like, what am I supposed to do? God has a message.
Exactly. Also, when there's so many people in church that are fake, how are they really going to have that connection to like source and be able to prophesize, and get messages from the universe?
Yeah. And then I think where it really, really hit me was when I was doing training to learn like how to read energy, how to work with energy. It was the first time that I was ever, gonna read someone's energy. And I remember my teacher, I was learning in a group setting, and I remember she was like, okay, so you guys are gonna read someone's energy today. And I was like super nervous because I'd never done that. And all she gave us was like the person's name, I think their age, what they do at like their job, and where they lived. And that was it. That's like all the information I got, complete stranger, right? And in my head, I was like, we're not supposed to read her energy. Like, who is this, And so she had us like go into our meditation and like write down what we were getting. I wrote down so much stuff. And when we came back into the group, I was so terrified, but I just like shared because I'm like, why, how would I know? Like, it was like very personal, deep stuff about this person. And I remember when I shared it, everyone was just kind of like, what the, like, and I was freaking out. I'm like, did I just make this up? And I remember my teacher saying, she was like, okay, so what she did was she actually read her mind. And I was like, I freaked out. Yeah. I legit freaked out because at that time I'm like, what do you mean I read her mind, And I remember actually like going to therapy after that and talking about it because that's how freaked out I was by the experience. And I had to learn. I actually think that because I feel like you sound like you were open and like embracing your spiritual self. I think I actually struggled with my spiritual self for a long time. I think that it was there, but I was like afraid, and I would kind of see it and step into it, but it was almost like a private thing because I do think that religion suppressed it a lot. I think that I was afraid to fully like own it. And so once I started energy training, it was like I had to face that fear, of like, oh shit, you're a powerful ass witch. Like, own that. And it was very hard for me to, even once I completed my energy training, it was hard for me to really like start opening up about that side of myself, especially because I had built a business around like being Christian and like, now I'm on this other side. And for me, it was actually a very scary journey to embrace my spiritual self.
Yeah, I remember when you were transitioning or you still had your Christian coaching business. I remember you sharing with me that you didn't feel aligned with those clients anymore. You really wanted to go more into the spiritual, non-religious, and you were worried because of what everyone was going to say, and you were battling with yourself.
It was hard because I felt like I couldn't fully be myself and I couldn't fully support them, because now I'm going into sessions knowing like I could just read your energy and like we would fix this really quick, or I could do an energy healing on you. But how do you explain that to somebody who maybe is going to look down on what you do, So I think for me, it's actually been a journey of like learning to embody my spiritual self and not be afraid of that and show it to the world. And I think I'm very much still on that journey. But I'm getting better, so.
I've always felt like you've been really, really powerful.
I just have to own that. It's scary. And you know what? I think a lot of people are very, very powerful. And I think the more we own it, the more powerful we become, So whether you're afraid or not, like the more we own that side of ourselves and the fact that we are spiritual beings, like I think it gives that side of ourselves permission to really show itself, So I don't know, there's something beautiful about embracing that side and not feeling like we have to hide it.
Yeah. I know we're going to dive into this more in another episode, but now that you're on the spiritual path, like how do you feel how do you find the balance with like being human here on earth and still being spiritual?
So like, how do I balance it?
Do you ever feel like you struggle with being too spiritual, or do you feel like you sometimes you struggle with being too earthy, that you're like, okay, I need to remember that I am a powerful being?
I think I don't now. I think when I started my spiritual journey, it was hard because I was really trying to get away from religion. And I think that spirituality, in a lot of ways, can replicate religion if you let it, you know? And
Yeah.
so when I started noticing that I was getting caught up in like what's right or wrong, or what is that person saying, or it started feeling almost very like churchy and triggering to me. And that's when I was like, oh no, this, like, we're not doing this again, you know,
Yeah.
like you learned from this experience. So I think for me now, I'm in a place where I don't even try to find balance, and I just focus it on trusting myself, you know, where it's like, what feels right for me in this season? What feels right for me in this moment? And that ultimately the answer is coming from me and not from anything or anybody outside of me. So I think that that's the way I see it, is like, as long as I come back to myself and my truth and I'm honoring that, I'm exactly where I need to be, whether today looked more mundane or more spiritual, because the reality is like I don't live my life with like 50-50, you know. I can't sit here and be like, you guys, I woke up and meditated today. No, I woke up, I was like, all right, go to the gym. You haven't gone in a week because you're on your period, like get your butt over there, get ready, come record the podcast, like.
Yeah.
But also that does not take away from my spirituality, you know. So I think that it's more allowing it to not even be a balance, but just be like a day-to-day, moment by moment decision, knowing that my actions do not change at the end of the day, like who I already was born to be. So
I love that answer.
that's how I see it. What about you?
I think for me, it's the flow. When, how you said, like, you know, I don't live my day 50-50, that
Yeah.
I'm gonna wake up and meditate, because I don't meditate every single day. I don't journal every single day either. You know, it really depends on how I'm feeling day of, and then also what I have to get done that morning, you know, because my mornings are more slow, but sometimes they do have to be a little bit more fast paced, like the days of like the gym and stuff. But it's more of just finding the flow, and for me doing what resonates with me in the moment, but never forgetting that I am a powerful being, and going back to my practices, and reconnecting with myself. I think that that's what's most important to me. But I don't know, for me, I feel like it just ties back to that everything is nothing and nothing is everything. Because that's how I find peace throughout my life, and how I feel like I'm able to balance being a human but still also being spirit, you know. I don't know, I just feel like I find that balance just by knowing that nothing really matters.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that's one of the things I love about us. And I think why I connect with you so much too is because we can be like really spiritual, but we also are just very grounded, practical.
Yeah, because I will say that in the beginning of like my spiritual journey, I was very woo woo, that at times I wouldn't like think logically, because I'm like, no, it's just like spirit and the universe, and I'm just like too much in my head about it, and not really like leveling, like, you know, using my mind and logic.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we have to remember that we are here to have a human experience. And that's something I especially at the start of my spiritual journey, had to remind myself of, because sometimes I was so like up here with spirituality that I had to remind myself, like, hey, just be a human for a moment, you know? And I think now I remind myself, like, I have to first be like a human self, and I have to allow myself to have spiritual experiences and to be in tune with the spiritual. But I chose to come to this earth and into this lifetime to be a human and to experience it. I do think in a supernatural way, when we're, you know, in tune with spirituality. But when you really get away from the human side of it, that's where I'm like, you didn't come to be a human to not be a human,
Yeah,
you
'cause
know?
there are a lot of spirituals too that are like, oh, you shouldn't drink alcohol, or you shouldn't foods? What are some other things? Or even a lot of spirituals are like, you shouldn't eat meat, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm vegan and I choose not to just because I don't eat meat for the fact that I don't think, at least in our country, we need it.
Mm-hmm.
And we should respect all beings on earth. But that's just my own spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of spirituals that'll be like, you can't do X, Y, and Z. And this goes back to, where you said that spirituality can very much kind of turn into a religion.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where a lot of spirituals will get too much into their own head, and forget that you are here on earth as a human to live a human experience. And it's okay to enjoy things as humans in this 3D realm, because we came here to do that. We chose to do that, So it's okay. Don't be too hard on yourself. Don't feel like you have to be like this perfect spiritual being that has to like ascend and you can't do no harm. And obviously don't do any harm, obviously, but like, we're not perfect. We're not perfect beings. So it's okay to be human,
Embody your human self, because that's what you are.
And it's beautiful to be human. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
Like, it's a blessing.
Like, there's a lot of beautiful life experiences, and I think when you allow yourself to be in your body and to experience life and the beauty of it, because when we leave Earth, it's a different realm, it's a different plane, and I think there's certain experiences we get to only have here, and to be able to allow ourselves to have those experiences is a beautiful thing. So how did you get into your spiritual awakening? Like, what started that?
My official awakening began in 2018, and I have a funny story. So it was in 2018 when I first had my first official awakening, I call it. I was introduced to the law of attraction in high school through my dad, but I didn't really super get into it because it was of the devil. And my mom would tell me and my dad, like, why are you watching that? Like, that's not, that's not of God. But so I was always super curious, but my official awakening came in 2018. And the reason why, guys, let me tell you. Okay, so 2018 was the year that I started to get into crystals and angel numbers, very superficial, into crystals and angel numbers. And I was like, and so I started to dabble more into astrology, and that was a year of me kind of like freeing my mind and myself and allowing myself to really explore. But I didn't do it too much because I was still very hesitant because of my religious upbringing. So in November 2018, I lost my cat Berlioz for about 3 days. And it was the worst experience of my life. My world shattered, guys. Like, I can't even tell you how I did not sleep for 3 days. I would not eat. I would not nothing. I just wanted my baby home. And I did anything and everything that I could to get him home. And then someone commented on my Instagram. They said, have you reached out to an animal communicator? And in my mind, I was like, huh? Because I had already been Googling, like, are there like animal detectives that can like find you? I was so desperate, guys. And so I reached out, this person commented and they're like, have you tried an animal communicator? And I was like, an animal communicator? Like, what do you mean, Yeah. And so she DM'd me. She said, a pet psychic. And immediately when she said pet psychic, I kind of like was like, I don't know,
Yeah.
And she's like, a pet psychic, like, there's this amazing lady and blah, 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 blah. She's like, it's like my passion now that when people lose their animals, that the first thing I do, pet psychic. Like, I recommend a pet psychic. I was so desperate, and I was like, you know what? And I even went to my mom. I'm like, Mom, like, this person said pet psychic, like, what do you think? She's like, well, I don't necessarily believe in that. Like, that's not really from God. She's like, but you know what? We just want our baby home, like, book her. So I was like, okay. And my mom told me that night that she just like prayed to God, and she's like, she's like, forgive me, but we're like desperate.
We need help.
We need help. And if this person can really help us find our baby, like, that's all we need, So I had like a quick call with her, and then she told me, she was like, look, I'm like, I don't have, I think it was, I spoke with her on Sunday and she couldn't get me the appointment until Monday, or it was Saturday and she couldn't get me the appointment till Monday. And to me, that seemed like the longest. And so finally on Monday, and similar to like, this is like hilarious, because so I get on the call with her, and she's like, okay, what's going on? And then all she asked me for, she was like, what's his name? What does he look like? And does he have a collar? And are there any nicknames? She didn't ask me for like any specifics, kind of like to what your coach was asking you about, like your
Yeah.
client. And she was like, okay, she's like, I'm going to go and meditate for about an hour, and then I will be back with any messages that I have. And then I remember thinking, like, she doesn't need a pic. And this lady was in Washington. I was here in California. And then I was like, all she needs is like what he looks like, his collar if he has one, his name, and any like nicknames, right?
Yeah.
And so she was like, but in the meantime, I want you to go do this. And she's like, but when you do this, make sure you're not telling anybody because it's illegal. She wanted me to spray my urine all over the neighborhood because apparently, like, you can call in your pets that way if they're ever lost because you're alpha, like, you know, to them. But what she told me that was so huge for me, she told me, she said, if you are in fear right now and you go spray that urine around your neighborhood, your child will know that alpha mom is terrified because they can smell those pheromones.
Oh my gosh.
She said, you need to go and sit and release. I want you to release, let go of the worry, let go of the fear, and I want you to start imagining yourself finding him and getting into that energy state, she told me. And in my mind, I'm like, what is this thing you're talking about? She's crazy, you know? And she was like, I want you to drink this many water bottles, get into a better energy state, and then when you do, I want you to grab the last like pee into a spray bottle, and you're gonna walk around the neighborhood and you're gonna spray your urine so that your baby can smell that you're okay. And they need to be able to smell and sense that you'll be able to protect them, because if you're in a state of fear, they're not gonna trust you. And so I was like, okay, whatever. I did it. And then she calls me back an hour later. And she was like, good news, he's alive. And she explained where he was, guys. She explained that she was like, the house is beige brown with like red brown trimming. There's a fence in the back with a lattice. There's dabbled lighting. There's a driveway and cement, and there are vehicles in the back. And he is 3 houses from your houses. And I remember she told me, she's like, you know, she said, I can't tell you like the address number or like the name of the street because animals can't read, but I'm just explaining to you what I'm seeing. And so, long story short, that evening I found him exactly where she said he was. 3 houses down at the place, at the houses she described, and that was when my official awakening began, because I remember thinking there is more to the universe than meets the eye and what we have been told our entire life. And that was the moment that I started looking into energy work. That is the moment that I started to really dive into my spiritual practices, and I started taking classes, and I just started becoming a student of the universe and the spiritual path. But that is basically like what was presented to me. And mind you, my child is a black cat, and we have like literally like the like best bond, and I do believe that he's my familiar that came into this life to teach me so much, and he's the one that brought that awakening to me in my life. But that's my spiritual awakening journey, and well, that's not the journey, but that's like how it started.
I've heard that story before, but it still just like gives me chills. Oh my god.
Yeah. So how did your awakening begin?
Okay, so my story is not that cool. But it basically, and I think I shared a little bit about this in, I think it was the last episode, because for me it really started with like my tower moment of like losing my marriage, my religion, my faith, everything, like, and the whole life I had with that. I literally, like, my life fell apart completely. I lost everything, and that was so challenging. And when I came back home, I started to go to therapy, but then at the same time I started to kind of explore, because after I started doing some healing work, I realized like I can't deny the experiences I had even within religion. While I might be mad at God, while I might be mad at the church, while I might be mad at what happened in my life, like I would look back and think of like that time in my bed or prophesying over people, and I would be like, you can't deny that, you know? And so because of that, I started to search and think, okay, well, if I don't want to go back to church, then what does my spirituality look like now? And I feel like I just started to try different things, go to different, different religions. I think I remember asking you about like tarot cards, and, I was just kind of exploring. And And then that's when I listened to a podcast episode, and they were interviewing somebody who trained under a shaman to do energy readings and healings and all of that. And she was talking about actually, she wasn't even on the podcast. I think they just talked about her. And so I went and found her, and I saw that she did energy readings. I didn't even know what that was. Like, I didn't know what energy anything was. But I just remember thinking, I need that, because I felt so lost and confused about what to do with my spirituality, and it was just like an inner knowing of like, you need this. And I remember it wasn't even cheap to book a session with her, but I was like, I just booked it. I was like, I have no idea what I just booked, but I need this. And I remember once I got on the session, everything she said to me was just like, that was exactly what I needed to hear. And then that's when I signed up, and I was like, okay, I want you to coach me and teach me like everything you do. I want to learn how to do it. I want to learn what you do. I want to learn about all of this. And ended up working with her one-on-one and did her groups and all of that. And that's what led me to tuning into like more of my spiritual side and really embodying it. So, yeah.
I love that.
Everyone's journey is different.
Did it feel familiar for you?
You know, it did after a while. I feel like when I was working with her one-on-one, it did, like it was actually really challenging at first. So I do think my fear was like still very present. I think it took a while for because, I was like, what am I doing? Because I do tend to be a very logical person. I think because I'm more strategic, because I tend to be more in my masculine energy, and I hadn't done any like work then to get into my feminine. So I feel like I always like want to understand things. And I had to learn to get out of my head, and so I feel like once I was able to get out of my head, which took a lot of work, like it took me a long time to be able to connect with my guides and be able to do all that.
But what's interesting is that you say that you had to understand the energy work and the healing. But did you feel like that when you were in church? Like you had to understand like where that was coming from?
Yes, but here's the thing, like, and this is why, right? Because religion has all the answers. So with religion, it's like there's the Bible, and
she said all the answers in quotations.
In quotations, right? Like the church has the answers for everything. It's easy to follow religion because it tells you what to do about everything in life, and there's a book, and there's this and there's that. And so with spirituality, it's not like that. And I think that's why it was hard. And I remember even having times where I was like, oh my God, it's so much easier to be a Christian because they just tell you what to do. You don't have to figure it out. So I think to transition out of that and to be like, oh shoot, I gotta tap into myself when your whole life you've just been told what to do. It was hard. It was actually a very hard transition for me. But I think eventually with time, I was able to overcome the fears I had around it. Because part of me was also kind of like, am I doing something wrong? Because I was still carrying old beliefs. So it took time to overcome the fears, to get out of my head, to get out of being told what to do and actually find the answers within myself and clear my own thoughts. So it actually took a while for me. But I feel like once I was able to clear a lot of that, then I was like, oh, this is home. Like, this is where I'm meant to be.
So beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks for your story. So yeah, pet psychics, you guys, it's a thing.
It really is. If you ever lost your baby, get a pet psychic.
Yep.
We shared so much information in this episode, and I think it's going to be really helpful for those that are looking into spirituality. But yeah, I think this was a beautiful episode, and I think we were really able to share a little bit of that journey.
I totally agree. And I know there's so much more we could say, like always, but we want to be mindful of your guys' time and wrap it up here. But, for sure we will be sharing a lot more.
Yeah. Definitely.
Thank you guys for tuning in.
Thank you guys so much. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.